Everybody. We'll get started in a few minutes. Sign into the agenda and add any opens. That would be super groovy. Oh man, is Sal in a library?
Sal has very bad Wi-Fi, so I'm in my local bookshop / cafe
Nice.
with like a second monitor and everything. It's awful.
Anybody has any opens, please add them in the open section. Got a handful of things to cover today.
Yeah, who else actually read the whole, 40 pages of the new cybersecurity report? Because I was actually genuinely super impressed and pleased and relieved. Oh, you printed it.
I'm on page 28. I marked it up. My jam.
Just like, the most technologically advanced sector, and you still print out the PDF to make it make sense. I appreciate it though.
I can't make notes on my laptop screen. All right, folks, it's 3 after the hour. I put the link into the agenda in the chat. Please let me know if you have any items to open. Can I get an assistant that is interested in helping us take notes today?
I can't today because I have to jump off at 30 minutes after. So anyone else?
I will try and do my best, but
Thank you, Glenn. Your best is all we can ask for, and I appreciate that. All right, do we have any new friends that wanted to say hello today? It's a good day to be a new friend.
Hey guys, I'm Michael. I'm from a company called Ilaria. We do space lasers. Ooh. And yeah, we're Google Spinout. Good to meet everybody.
Welcome, welcome. All right, so I know we've all been waiting around with bated breath on an update on the mobilization plan. So I am pleased to announce that the TAC gave us enough votes to recommend the plan to the governing board. And we are now currently developing the process of how the governing board will be ingesting these requests. So I'm working with Mike Dolan from LF Legal, and we're going to have someone assigned to us to help us. There's going to be a small deck we'll have to build, but very excited, very good final progress. So ideally, we will have an actual potential funding statement within the next month or so, I hope. Fingers crossed. Our friend, the foundation brought on a gentleman named Sam Ramji, and he's been kind of helping facilitate kind of process and strategic things. So he's helping move a lot of these things forward. So we're very happy for Sam's help. And ideally, we'll get in front of the potential donators very soon. Any questions about that? Mr. Rousseau.
So I think I already know the answer because of how many times you couched the lack of process in place right now. But is it safe to assume that the TAC approved the plan as is with no changes to be presented to the governing board?
The TAC
Okay.
recommended the plan that the governing board should consider.
Okay.
And I yet again asked for feedback because feedback is a gift. And we have not received any presents.
So it's just that awesome.
It is just that. It's so self-explanatory and awesome.
Cool.
Even a caveman can understand it.
Thank
But I didn't. I asked an attack yesterday. Please look at the plan and let us know if you think it's honestly great, or if you had questions, you were confused, you see things we missed. But I've not gotten anything back. Sad. All right. Next item. Fun fact: the U.S. government released a cybersecurity strategy last week. So now we have a plan to do something ish. Well, fun fact, section 4.6, you know what it talks about? It talks about developing a national strategy to strengthen our cyber workforce, AKA more education. Yay. So I think as we move forward, talking with the governing board, this is another excellent data point to encourage people that we are working on the right things and trying to help make things better. So I think that's just going to be excellent supporting evidence for us to continue forward with the plan. As Sal mentioned, it is a pretty decently written doc. It's focused on a lot of US stuff, but overall it echoes things that ENISA and other entities around the world are talking about. Has anyone had a chance to look at it, or do you have any thoughts you want to share?
Yeah, I mean, it's a long read. It's super worth the time though, especially if you want to use it to put yourself to sleep, except for this section. I mean, there were a couple of what I found interesting was that it was holistic and actually understood where vulnerabilities come from. And, but I think that holistic element of it, and particularly this focus on both education and environmentalism, that I didn't expect to see in there. So I guess my question is, what do we do to sort of scope in and around from this 4.6? Because it seems essential, and I'm wondering if there is something to sort of tie there to amplify, or if that's just a statement from them.
If that I don't know. If the group is interested in more explicitly tying itself to things like the cybersecurity strategy, that's great. I don't know. We're all kind of in limbo waiting for someone with a very prestigious title to hand us a sack of money. So we'll see. I know they also talk about grants and scholarships, which is again something that was part of part 3 of our plan. So there's another potential avenue that we could pursue for funding. We'll see if people are interested in kind of strategizing on how we might incorporate some of that. I'm glad to donate a little time to that, either today or in a future call, or an asynchronous call, or Slack, or email.
No, let's literally just start a thread on the Edu Slack for this, where we can just literally like copy and paste the interesting sections for us to discuss, because I think there's a bunch we can skip, some that we can't. There's some cool stuff.
Right. Cool. Any additional thoughts? Speaking of our award-winning Slack channel, our friend Max stumbled across something interesting on the internet, and it's not a picture of a cat. Max, do you feel comfortable sharing a couple minutes about what you found on Roadmap SH?
Oh yeah, sure thing. Let me see if I can get my camera on here. Hey folks, it turns out some people out there have already open source training material. Who knew? I was speaking to the CEO of a tech company about how he onboards interns. And he says he sends them to this website called roadmaps.sh and it does the rest. I thought I got to check out this website because this guy is pretty smart. And it is a fantastic website. It's, you know, it's genuinely an open source set of trainings. I think it does two things really, really well. One is that it curates content in a open and evolving way. Everything's hosted on GitHub, lots of links to YouTube videos, you know, tutorials, blah, 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 blah. But the thing that I think is really cool about it is that it actually curates these kind of learning journeys that structure and order the different concepts and tools and tech you need to learn to claim proficiency in a certain area. You know, so their front end developer track, the first topic is the internet, which I think makes a ton of sense. Because you do need to know about that to be a front end developer. Yeah, and it goes through CSS and a bunch of frameworks. Like all good open source things, it's very transparent about what is a personal recommendation, what is an alternative vendor or library. So, you know, things are kind of coded on there. But yeah, great resource. You know, if you're working with, you know, with people who are new to certain technologies or UI yourself, like I think it's a great resource. There is specifically a cybersecurity track on there. Let me just double check what it's called because there's more than one. Yeah, cybersecurity. So it's called cybersecurity expert. And I think that means that there's a lot of little boxes on there. It's basically like an empty like taxonomy, really, of topics. I think it's quite traditional in that, you know, it covers a lot of it is around kind of, you know, networking knowledge, cryptography, you know, different attack types. It does get a little into kind of, you know, cloud and platform engineering, some of that stuff. But yeah, I think it's a really interesting taxonomy to look at. I think there's an opportunity for us to contribute to it, to link to it in some way, perhaps as we shape out our training. It definitely hasn't already done the work for us, fortunately / unfortunately, as this track is pretty unpopulated. I definitely yeah, recommend looking at one of the more populated tracks. The front end stuff, the React stuff is kind of particularly well known and used. Feel free to ask any questions. I won't have the answers. Sal asked a great question, which is kind of like who's behind it. My understanding is that it was initially the news stack. So yeah, you know, there should be like a cloud and sort of DevOps Kubernetes angle to it, which is pretty cool. But yeah, specifically, it looks like there's one maintainer, as ever, with all really good open source projects plugging away and doing the vast majority of the work. He's a really cool guy. Cameron Acme has a bunch of good YouTube content as well. So yeah, recommend checking him out. Links are in the Slack.
And one thing I noticed when I was cruising around the roadmaps, he addresses personas like the front end developer, QA engineer, which is again another learner we were thinking about talking to. I think this is really interesting. What is the rest of the group's thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, my point of view, so when I'm looking at these learner pathways, I'm sorry, it's very loud. But what I want to be able to do is have my personas have a starting and ending point where we make it very clear what it is that we are able to perform on and not. So I think like if I got a front end persona, I want to point them towards that, have them do everything that's filled out. I think there's a very cool opportunity here to like help them with the sub box of open source security, which again is not going to exist in their curriculum because it doesn't exist anywhere, right? But we also want to look at platforms of high impact, and this is a platform of high impact. So I love the idea of partnering with them because they are going to have a really good, I mean, they've got a lot of experience communicating to the average GitHub user, which is ideal for us. I like it. This is super cool.
Yeah, I just like +1 on that. I think when personas and learning journeys work really well, they're dynamic, right? So there's there's a subset of the cybersecurity expert path that perhaps everybody should take as part of their computer science undergrad. There's a subset of it that front-end developers should take when they start in industry. There's probably a big chunk of it that somebody should take if they want to have security engineer as their job title. You know, I think that will be a really interesting way of doing it, mapping subsets of it to our, I guess, more detailed personas and learners as well.
Any additional initial thoughts or comments? Do we want to try to reach out to this fella and maybe have a chat with him?
I'm happy to take responsibility for doing so.
Oh,
I have some potential other business with him as well. So yeah, very happy to reach out. It feels to me like the best outcome could be them joining the group.
Yeah, I was going to say, reach out, temperature test how much anxiety they have over filling out this entire cybersecurity track, and then see if there's a nice relationship there where we explicitly state the shared engagement. Because I think most of this information exists out there that they've got mapped, just has to be filled in. But there's that one massive spot, that open source spot, which could fit inside of, I honestly, and this is my point of view, but I'm sick of having to patch my engineers all the time. It's for every single persona that's represented here. They got to understand how to not mistype map.lib on me. I'm so tired of non-automated vulnerability ingestion. But yeah, I think this is great. And I also personally, I really like the layout of this. And this might be something to sort of think about in terms of those visualizing those learner pathways as we look at SKM.
and I
Yeah, you
think
make a great point, Sal, that I didn't really put together, which is that there's no open source best practice in this open source training program, right? That, you know, there's even like an API security piece, but there isn't an open source one. So that's definitely an opportunity. There's tons of different aspects to open source, right? From how to structure a good PR, through to how to engage with the community, through to the security angle, which I think at the moment is, you know, the hot topic.
and remember that we had one of our goals is to create free and open training materials. So there's definitely an opportunity to cross collaborate with them, as we will be ideally generating or identifying good open content. Cool, good find, Max. Thank you. All right. And I will never take the basics of subnetting class ever again. So now that we are starting to get a little more momentum and things are happening in the world, I think it's not a good time to start to potentially pick back up on some of our work and start collaborating on some of these things that you know, don't cost anything, don't have an outlay of an FTE or a tool. So I think I put together a couple suggestions. Is the group interested in trying to collaborate on any of these three areas, or an area of your own suggestion? So thinking about, do we want to refine our personas and start to think about what journeys they want to travel on? Do we want to take a look at the content we have and start to maybe put, you know, organize that as in a beginner, intermediate, expert, or kind of put them into boxes for the personas? Or do we want to start looking at a gap analysis right now? We know we're missing some things out of the gate, like QA testing or manager training. So do we want to start to maybe more prescriptively identify some of those gaps? What do we want to do?
I know that there's some personas that already exist and that are around the organization, right?
Mm-hmm. There are several working groups have personas, and we have started a list of our own. And, you know, do we want to double check those? What we thought 6 months ago, is that still good, or do we want to refine?
Yeah, my ask is, please go and refactor the wheel we have created instead of creating a new one. So we've got this list of matrix, which was meant to, so this is our gap analysis that we did initially. It could use right now, and especially there's way more content and a lot more awareness than there was 6 months ago around security. So we might get to update this, but specifically, I would want us to look at the learner personas represented here because that's how we made our original decision around resources. So if this still makes sense, then we've got a lot to work with here. If this doesn't make sense, let me know. We can fix it. But I think this needs like an active review from new players, because I think basically all of the knowledge from anyone that's contributed to this is in this, but I think we need new eyes, new opinions, new resources if we can, because I missed what Max has and that would have been great to put in here. So
So what sparks joy to collaborate on next?
I would say maybe trying to gather the other personas and look at our personas and maybe trying to minimize the amount of work we have to do if other people are already doing work that is applicable. That seems like a pretty low hanging fruit, easy win.
what I would request as we're starting to get this, because this is just a little bit of PR, but also useful, I would ask that we go back in and review the learner slash, it was both learner and then professional personas. I'd kind of ask, I think it makes sense for us to write up a 3-4 sentences of each professional persona prioritized over learner persona, because there's no difference. And as far as we're concerned, the people that want to provide the funding and resources for this only want to do so if they're able to hire. So I think we can much more clearly define the professional personas and just link the learner personas to them, then we can organize the content. But I think that that would be a good impact. And we've underdefined those right now, I think.
I think we all have a assumption of what those roles are, but we've not actually formally said this is what the group feels these roles are and how we're going to take action on them. I think that's a good step, Sal.
Strange thought on the professional personas. Would it be possibly useful to talk to some of the job boards and such, Indeed and so on? I imagine they've already got some pre-created categories that might be useful.
Maybe.
We do have the folks from Indeed are now members of the foundation. We certainly could reach out to them and see if they had any information they might be willing to share with us.
I mean, that sounds like if nothing else, an email.
Yep.
Is anyone interested in tracking job board contacts down? Paste. Link. Maybe I'll link. Hold on. Let's see what this does. Oh, look at that.
Well, I mean, worst comes to worst, I know how to write an email.
Do we have a volunteer that's interested in doing some of that legwork for us while I fix my table?
Yeah, I don't have time this week, but I think, is there anything from like the Linux Foundation? Because we've like Linux Foundation does hiring statistics annually. Can we lean on that as well? Or
I
the job board?
can ask if we have anything like that in education, but I've been told that we don't. Just for the record, I've been told that they like the marketing we have is like more SEO type stuff, but I will double check with my people and let you know if that exists.
You're talking with Clyde Superside and such?
Yep, exactly. Or Tim probably first and maybe Clyde then after.
Okay.
And I'm trying to get our current personas visually input on our meeting agenda here.
When I look at the learner personas, they're all like absolutely valid. But I'm wondering if we can group them in some ways into kind of new to, enterprise software development, right? I don't think it necessarily matters if someone is higher ed or trade school or, job change, right? Their actual learning objectives should be fairly similar. Otherwise you get to the point where it's like, oh, they go to this boot camp, they'll already know about, SSH, and they go to this boot camp, they won't. And I think that gets pretty tricky. So I wonder if the learner personas make more sense around kind of entry level specialization and management as three groups. Like when I'm looking at them, that's kind of how I group them. And when you scroll through the check boxes against the different things, there's definitely a lot of commonality between multiple of the personas aligning with many of them. So I wonder if like a grouping like that could help, just to rationalize the way that the content gets lined up.
Yeah, and I mean, this is actually a way that you can do like product and content strategy generally. If we start out with much fewer, like a persona of 3 or 4 or 5 max, maybe 3 or 4 is good, then potentially, and depending on the way we set it up, but it's Node.js on the back end, as far as I understand, we can actually backtrack and see where specific personas are bifurcating and create new personas that make sense. It's easier to do it that way than the other way of having 15 personas and then trying to descatter that signal. And it also makes our job easier right now as we just delineate them into those specific types. So that might be, I think, rather than reducing the complexity, is a good way for us to step forward. I agree.
I also think that it Saul, to add to what you're saying, it reduces the operating overhead, if you will, because that's what we've been talking about a lot, is like pick your battles, because you can't win them all, and it gets really expensive to try to win them all. I would actually say, even as far as like the SKF platform, LF would rather us start focusing more on like entry level content, because when you get to the more complicated stuff, it gets trickier. So they would like us to kind of, like, we're building a hierarchy of courses for like how cyber, like the SKF framework, if you will, and we're basically saying all 100 level courses can remain free, open source. Those are like easier to maintain, but when you get to the more specialized stuff, like there is actual overhead in a lot of that stuff to put content together and stuff like that.
So I mean, the foundational content is by definition the low hanging fruit here. So yeah, definitely a +1 on that being an initial focus area.
So do we wish to refine the current learner personas into a basic, intermediate, expert style grouping? Or do we wish to focus on the professional personas? Which path forward is the group interested in pursuing right now? Or both? Nothing. We have a lot of people. Nothing to say we can't do both.
I think both make sense, but I worry about the workload.
Is there a foundational persona that covers all of the professional personas?
There might be.
We haven't done that work yet, and that's what I was
Right.
trying to inspire.
But that could be a really interesting thing to think about, right? Like, do we need a foundational level network security?
Well, I think
right.
Probe, doesn't one of the other groups have it?
Have what?
The personas, the professional level personas.
So the vulnerability disclosure working group has a set of personas around coordinated vulnerability disclosure. The supply chain group, I believe, has a set of personas around supply chain stuff. And those are the only two and I know that the end user working group wants to make some personas.
I think Jonathan has some starter too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So no one is looking at this with the lens of education and training,
Right.
which doesn't mean to say we can't borrow the salsa stuff when we get into, we want to do a supply chain education course. We couldn't borrow from there, but I think that's probably not going to start us off super well if we want to look at, foundational stuff.
Fair.
My instinct looking at the content here is that there is like a security engineer kind of foundational level that really kind of bridges,
I agree,
a lot of the topics that are out there. And I think, security engineering is a thing that ties most closely with the open source AppSec side, as opposed to going hard into network engineering, infrastructure engineering, or endpoint protection, or any of the many other areas that they're probably all represented in that foundational track, to lesser or greater extent. But I do wonder if there is a professional persona as like entry level, and actually the personas we've got here are more like the intermediate level, sort of branching out from entry level.
Christine.
I guess I was going to probably plus one what Max said, and one of the things that you were going to thinking of doing is kind of like contacting the job boards, but I guess even within those descriptions, there might be something that's like a common denominator for some of the personas of some of those jobs that could help inform what should be like the basic track, or things that every persona might need to know. So that could help.
So it's sounding like the group is thinking about this kind of kernel of a security engineer foundational role that you would eventually build up other areas of specializations and other trainings from. Do we think that's a good approach? We want to think about that foundational role first and see what we need to do to help serve that learner?
Yeah.
I think so. I think so, because as you were saying, that some of the things that the US government wants to do is just to kind of increase the cyber workforce. And if you kind of show that that's the direction that you're starting with, that should help.
The argument not to would be if one of the other personas had more impactful skills gap, right? If we were saying the real problem is that there is no training for open source project maintainers, or we don't have enough people who know about, cloud security. What I'm seeing from all of the reporting, and I mean, really the call to action for this initiative within the Open SSF is actually, it is at the entry level. It's reach in terms of as many developers as possible having security fundamentals is the biggest gap. But I think we shouldn't be closed to the idea that there might be other areas that are more important. I think that's probably the ingoing assumption. It sounds like the US government agrees with us as well.
At least my personal opinion, before I flip over to Jay, is that every job is important, but for example, cloud security is something I think we probably could back burner, because there are other groups that do this and probably do it better than us kind of pretending to be cloud security at the time, or trying to build those relationships. And I think focusing on that core competency might be a good path for us. I yield the floor to Jay.
Yeah, thanks, Crow. And as a caveat to what you just said, because I was getting ready to say the exact same thing. I think when we start off with that foundation, I think we got a lot of questions to ask. Due to a large number of layoffs that have happened recently, people are asked to do a lot more with a lot less. So what does a foundational education look like today versus what it looked like 6 months ago, right? You had a lot of individuals that maybe were set on, helping out with risk assessments. Well, now they're asked to do not just technical risk assessments, but administrative risk assessments, maybe physical risk assessments. Do they know enough about physical security to do a risk assessment? Because that's a whole other animal into itself. So what does foundational education look like today versus what it looked like 6 months ago? I think we might what could be a good course of action for us right now, maybe a survey, maybe we reach out to the industry to see what exactly they're asked, what exactly the industry is asking its employees to do now versus what it was asking them to do 6 months ago. I mean, to break off of what Crow said, as foundationally, that foundation could ease that foundation's changed. There's a crack in the foundation now, right? And we've all experienced it across our different organizations. There's a huge crack now. And you know, it wasn't just in one area or the other. I mean, that's my 2 cents on that.
And I agree, Jay. And at least my observation is with all these major tech company layoffs, there are a substantial amount of jobs in regular folk places, banks, retail, insurance, healthcare, not necessarily big tech. And that is a slightly different skill set that you're going to be forced to do things like maybe you never had to do those physical risk assessments before in your job historically,
Exactly.
but now you're tasked to.
Exactly. And I'll even branch off to that and say, how many of us know what the FFIEC is? You see, I'll raise my hand too, right? But there's
I
a
worked at a
lot
bank
of
for
us.
7 years.
Exactly. You'd have to work in finance to understand what that is. But that is the de facto finance cybersecurity framework, right? So if you don't know what the FFIEC is and you're going to be a security professional in finance, and you know there's been layoffs happening all over the place. Now people are finding jobs in these very niche or very specific, going to healthcare, finance, government. There are different rules in each one of these locations, different practices in these locations. You need to know at a foundational level, right? So what does foundation actually look like today? And then what new skills are you teaching somebody who just got laid off from a tech company who's now finding employment in these very specific locations, right? So all questions we need to ask. You know?
So I feel like we've kind of landed on two next steps, is defining and refining our security engineer foundation and trying to identify what skills are needed there. And then Jay's idea of this survey of trying to pull information out from the community to see what new things people have been tasked to learn, or what new skills do they need to know. Does the group seem to agree with those two immediate paths forward?
Certainly agree here. I think a really good approach that I've seen work well in collection with doing a sort of a survey, some real data collection, is just to do like a Delphi method. Get 5 or so subject matter experts together and get on a Miro board or something and thrash out like, what does the basic knowledge look like for a security engineer? Time and time again, it's 95% correct compared to when you go away and do the real research. So I don't know if it might be worth trying to collect a Delphi group of some sort from within our group here or the wider community, and do that kind of whiteboarding session.
I like it. So do we have any volunteers to help us lead those two paths forward, to kind of be a kind of little sub-project leader to help us continue our momentum on these two areas? Figuring out the survey. I like the idea of the conversation with a group of experts to help kind of get that 95% list. Jonathan.
I have a question
42.
about this. Yeah, thank you. The Delphi group, is this like security is I mean, I've been sitting here in this call and maybe I missed something because brain, but security is a massive topic, right? So this Delphi group, people focused on AppSec. Is this group focused on network security? Is this group focused on, like, there are so many aspects of security that you could come away with a just massive list. And so for us, are we primarily concerned with AppSec, or are we concerned with something else on top of AppSec?
Our primary mission is application security and roles that kind of are satellite around open source development. So Kubernetes management, cybersecurity, developer management, that type of stuff. But predominantly we're focused, the core of it is teaching people to write better code and instill better security practices.
So you want AppSec people, basically. That's the high level answer to that question then.
That is the bulk of what we're focused on right now. Yes.
Right. Okay. I'm not. Sorry, go ahead.
I would broaden it slightly to development security. So, for example, you've got kernels, which aren't apps in the usual sense, but are still software development security. How's that?
Software development security,
Right.
to be broader.
I am available to be a resource, but I do not have the cycles to run any sort of initiative in this department.
Okay. Well, good. We will lean on your expertise as part of our data gathering. Was anyone interested in kind of helping champion the surveys and then the kind of foundation pieces for us? Just to help coordinate a call and get some folks to have a little chat. I'll send a note out to the full list after this call, but it's something I would ask everyone here to think about and consider, just to volunteer to lead a couple phone calls so that we can start to make some traction.
Yeah, I want to be supportive, but I'm afraid to say no. Yes, right now. I've.
Don't worry, I got plenty of work for you, Wheeler.
I bet you do.
I know it's the ideas are a dime a dozen, but it's the how much time is actually available to implement them is the real ask.
Yeah.
All right. I saw that we had one more thing on the agenda. Is there any more thoughts on these two paths forward? It seems like we're generally in agreement. We just need to try to find some time to focus on them. Any objections to those two paths?
I object. No, I'm good.
All right. Let us talk. I saw we had a note about SKF, correct? We're going to do an update, Randall and Glenn?
Yeah, I removed it because I thought it'd be better if we have this conversation off camera or off our recording, because yeah.
Okay. Well, anyone interested in an exciting conversation about SKF in the next day or so, let me know and we'll set up something.
Yeah.
I'm not logged in as admin, so I can't turn the recording off.
No worries.
I can turn the recording off, but I don't think we should do that right now. So
yeah, we're still.
You want to have a private conversation? This is not the place.
Well, right. I don't want to publicly start pointing fingers. I mean, I could tell you in a nutshell, like we are in the process of receiving and organizing SKF funding, and there's a lot of things that come attached to that, and it's a conversation about for example, LF doesn't want us to duplicate efforts where they already have efforts ongoing and stuff along those lines. So, yeah.
Well, we can have a conversation about that at some point in the future then.
Yep.
Just so everyone's aware, the SKF team is going through some changes and we may need to adjust our mobilization plan accordingly, potentially.
On the other hand, I don't want to make that sound like a bad thing. I mean, it's a good thing. There's efforts to try to turn ideas into realities. And while you don't want to make say anything's done until it's actually done, I am all for working out details to turn ideas into realities.
Mm-hmm. And that's exactly what it is, David, is that basically like we're still going through legal, but a lot of things are starting to be set in stone, which is kind of why adjustments I think should be made, or because their LF doesn't know a whole lot about what we discuss here in the education SIG, to say it lightly.
Well, LF's a big play, like any organization. The LF
Correct.
education folks, they focus on the mechanics of helping folks get through courses, not the not the contents of courses. That's okay, because we want people who develop content of courses to be able to focus 100% on that, and not on I can't log in. How do I fix that?
Correct.
Which, I mean, somebody does need to do that, but it doesn't need to be the same person.
Right. But yeah, that's a conversation is definitely warranted there at some point.
Great. Well, we will have such a thing at the appropriate time. Any additional thoughts or topics we'd like to discuss today in our last 14 minutes together today?
I have a 30-second plea, and I snuck it onto the agenda. You don't have to accept it, but basically
I accept it.
You accept it. All right. This is just a replea from the best practices working group. Also, there's a very specific thing involving HTML targets and security. There's a section in the current course. There are questions about whether or not this is obsolete, but this is one of those annoying areas where if it was clearly obsolete, great, let's get rid of it. We no longer have to, something we don't have to explain because it's handled by default is the best outcome, except that we haven't been able to confirm that it's obsolete. So if you are familiar with the issues of HTML targets, yep, thank you. And it's also in the notes. I would love to hear from you. I've gotten a lead in on somebody from the Chrome team, but it's remarkably hard to track down. Nobody wants to admit that there is no longer a problem. There used to be a problem. There was people who did things. Can we say there isn't a problem? No one's willing to say that, but I want to be able to say that. That sounds like a terribly simple thing.
I also commented on it, David. I also had it in my trainings actually, but I removed it like a half year ago because, when I was doing the training, it didn't work anymore. So it was quite funny. Not like, oh, look, shit, security and things work. Actually, they do solve things, but
I'm happy to delight. We still talk about CSRF, but it's no longer the problem it used to be. For example, thanks to new cookie settings. But
so if you wanna double check, I mean, there is still the lab image that is still in there in the Docker repository, so you can still pull the lab that actually demonstrated the vulnerability also with the steps.
Right, no, that's actually not the issue. I can't reproduce. I agree with you. I can't reproduce the original stated example, but I've been burned several times. And in fact, there's a whole bunch of people who have fixed, oh, look, the specific code that you use to demonstrate the problem no longer works. Therefore, the vulnerability went away. And the answer is, no, you didn't understand the problem. Change these two characters, the problem reappears. And so, having been burned by the test, the issue isn't the test. The issue is the problem gone? Not does the test work?
Yeah, to be honest, I think in this case, I get totally what you mean. Technically, an iframe shouldn't be able to read the content where it's iframed in, but because of magic and whatever that we don't want to go into details, again and again, it's possible, and every browser has their own specific exploiting way to craft this and bypass it and whatnot. So I do get what you're saying, but in this case, no, it's really a relic of the past.
Okay, all right.
That is my personal opinion.
Okay, I need actual evidence. It is no longer true because X. So if you've got pointers, that'd be great. And Joe, I'm just asking more broadly. If anybody here has pointers, that's what I'm looking for. Thank you.
And so you mentioned that you're already reaching out to folks within the Chrome team.
Yes.
Do we need to reach out to anybody with the Firefox group?
Yes, I have not, but I'd love to. I'm not sure who to contact there. I do have one contact, but I'm a little for reasons I don't want to go into here. I'm a little leery of doing that. So
Well, maybe ping Dan Applequist, since he works with W3C, the web people. So maybe he might have a contact over there within the Firefox team that we could talk to just to validate.
Also, their security contact is not, that sending something via their security channel is probably not a terrible idea.
that's a cool idea.
Yeah.
Yeah. I had as an aside, fun side story. The Zoom vulnerability that I found in 2019, I reported to the Firefox and Chrome team. And the Firefox, I didn't give them the details of who was impacted, but they said this is not a vulnerability in Firefox. This is just a known standard vulnerability, and they published it. And I'm like, no, you can't do that. This thing is still under embargo. Like, so they quickly closed that one up, and then So, anyways, I had a fun time. They handled it well, but I had a fun time with a big security vulnerability with the Firefox team a few years ago.
All right. Any additional thoughts or comments? All right, team, thank you for your time today. I'm excited, hesitantly optimistic about our progress moving forward. Excited to see us finding some things we can start to continue to work on. And we will talk to you all later. And some of you I'll probably talk for the next 2 hours with. Cheers all.
Thanks.
Bye.